Joining us today from the salubrious surrounds of Casa del Rey is Ryan Smith, the Liberal Shadow Minister for Planning, and Mario Beeks, security consultant, ex-Croatian military officer, and the author of the wonderful book, Blood and Soil. Good morning, guys.
Good morning, Michael.
Now, today, we want to talk about something that's got a fair bit of airtime: transgender women in sport. And Mario, Ryan, I'm going to go to you first because she's running for the federal seat of Warringah. She's a Liberal minister or candidate. How do we go about this? It really seems like it's devolved into something pretty ugly.
Yeah, it does. And I have to say from the outset, I don't have a view on this issue. And I guess I say that because I haven't had any exposure at all to the issue. I mean, I'd be happy to sit down with anyone from either side of the debate that would want to talk to me about getting a deeper understanding of it all. Having said that, I don't think many people in Warringah, and I can say for categorically in Warrandyte that no one's ever approached me about it. And I'm sure that the good people of Warringah have more pressing things on their mind. Not to say it's unimportant, but I think this election is about so many other things. And I think the best thing we can do in these circumstances is let the various sporting bodies deal with the issue. It's not something that the Prime Minister or even, for that matter, members of Parliament need to get involved in at this point. And I'm not sure why it's become the issue that it is when the sporting bodies can really manage the situation themselves. And again, I say I'd be very happy to talk to anyone who wanted to give me a deeper understanding of the issue. But that's where I think things are at, that it's a bit of it's become a discussion point for a few days anyway, that seems over and above the pressing issues that are facing Australia more broadly.
It's actually become a bit of a wedge issue here. I think it's an ugly, repugnant, horrific debate with some of the comments that have been made and some of the people it's brought out of the woodwork, which can only be described. And, you know, here at the Informer, we're huge advocates for free speech, but it's not free speech when you've got a megaphone and a platform and it's used as a rallying cry to congregate these bigots and attack what is clearly one of the most vulnerable sections of our population. You know, these kids are 15 times more likely to decide to suicide. They're, you know, ostracized to start with. And as you rightly say, Ryan, every single sporting code, major sporting code, has a policy in place. So it's a non-issue, but I think it's been used as a, you know, the woke, you know, oh, we can't have the woke running the things because this is what will happen. The fact that I don't even like to give her airtime, but the candidate for Warringah said they were 50% of them were sex offenders or pedophiles. The children were mutilated. You know, that's just, I don't know how she still holds her position as the candidate.
Yeah, well, people will make their own judgment on these things. I think the 50% figure that she quoted was taken from out of context from what I read. I don't know to be true. I think there was some UK report that came out that said something of that nature, and I don't know the details, but it was taken out of context. But, you know, I don't know, Catherine, I don't know, frankly, any of the candidates that are up in New South Wales in particular, so I can't comment on where she's coming from with her approach. She clearly has an opinion, and I don't, you know, if you're, as you rightly said, you know, we all, I think on this show, believe in free speech. If she has an opinion, she's entitled to articulate it, and people will make their own judgments.
Mario, what are you thinking?
Look, I'm not involved in politics, Victoria, and you know, I just know briefly, so I'll not interfere with the conclusions and opinions because, as I say, I'm not aware of all the angles of this debate. But the free speech, I mean, it's come to transgender in sport. You know, I truly believe that society evolving, and we need to accept that this debate about transgender in sports, and as you said, they are most likely they commit suicide 50% or 50. What was the statistically being said? I think that this is requiring a healthy debate on all levels, not just on the politics, because politicians as a politicians, they're gonna argue amongst themselves, but there must be some type of discussion with transgenders and everybody in sports and all at the bodies to see what modus operandi can be reached that everybody be happy with the conclusion. I truly don't believe that politicians as a politicians should be only one who is going to bring the decisions bring forward and then make it the actual legislation on that respect. Free speech is important. I truly believe Australians, they don't know. I'm saying as an immigrant for 22 years in Australia, I truly believe that people in Australia don't understand how lucky and fortunate they are. And I'm employing everybody to come forward and create the debate and the discussion around the topic in a much more broader public forums, not amongst politicians only.
Now, I do have a lot of experience in sporting bodies and sporting codes. I was an elite level strength and conditioning coach all the way up to AFL strength and conditioning, world champions. And sport is all about a fair and level playing field, removing those advantages. There's actually a section in our sporting codes that accommodates this, and it's been there for years, and it wasn't to accommodate transgender. It was there. We've all seen, the under 14s football side, where suddenly you've got some kid who's hit puberty a bit earlier and he's 6'6" and weighs 100 kilos, and he's just dominating. Well, there's actually within the code where you can test on strength, weight, height, bench press, and then have them excluded from that competition on that thing. Otherwise, for those who think that winning is everything in sports, we would see clubs actively going around and you would see a team of under 14 bearded monsters running through the kids. So it is actually a non-event. And for those of you who are on Twitter, I would implore you to search out Kirsty Miller. Transgender athlete, was represented Australia in 5 different sports, has now transitioned to a woman. And as she says, we've got to take estrogen, we've got to take testosterone blockers, we've got to take all of these things that bring it back to a level playing field. But we need to realize sport isn't just about sport. It's about belonging. It's about achieving. It's about all of these wonderful things. It's about health, mental health, all of these things where we belong as a community. And we need to, rather than go, no, we just got to ban them. This debate needs to go, what can we put in place to include them? What do you think?
Well, I don't disagree with you. And I think that's, we talk about Twitter and other social media platforms and we talk about free speech, and it seems debate degenerates into criticism and abuse. And I think that, as I said, whether it be me or Catherine in Eves in Warringah or anyone else, being educated is far more beneficial than being berated, which is something that we seem to see on social media, that just people berate and criticise and hurl abuse when people have a different opinion. And even yourself, Michael, saying, I don't know how she still holds her position. Well, she has a view. And instead of saying, I don't know how she still holds a position, perhaps say, maybe we should take some opportunity to educate her on some of the issues that you just spoke about.
True. The other one that I have problems with now is in defence of her position. She's come out and she's likened it to defending the children of the Holocaust. Now, anytime the Holocaust is used as the measuring stick or the yardstick, we're not talking like hailstones and golf balls. We're talking about the Holocaust. It's not a comparative or subjective measurement. The Holocaust is its own worst on its own. How do we get rid of this hyperbole? How do we dial it down a bit? And as you rightly said, Ryan, start to educate and start to really ask questions where you're not being cancelled. We can understand that you've got concerns. How do we address them? How do we wind this back when no side seems to be willing to go, breathe, come in, sit with me, and let's go through it step by step?
Yeah, it is gone to a ridiculous level. I mean, I remember when the anti-pandemic bill demonstrators were on the steps of the Victorian Parliament, and the Labor government labelled them as far-right fascists, and indeed as Nazis at different points, or neo-Nazis, because as if that, you know, takes the sharpness from it. But you know, it is the opportunity to call your political opponents far right just seems to come out all the time now from the left, and it does need to be dialed down, because it's just becoming less and less meaningful, I suppose. So I'm not sure how to dial it down. I think there's social media platforms have ramped up in people's minds that it's suddenly acceptable to call people all sorts of different names, things that you would never do to, well, you previously wouldn't have done to their faces. I'm finding more and more, even in my profession, that people are more willing, having probably spent the last decade saying whatever they want on social media, they are more willing to be abusive to your face in a way that they never have been before.
Mario, you've had actual real life experience of this in Croatia. So
Yeah.
what do you say when you see these comparisons? And let me be clear, the far left are just as bad as the far right. The pendulum seems to be swinging wildly from side to side. And my goal has always been, as Marcus Aurelius said, the ultimate goal is never to become like the wrongdoer. And that's just gone out the window. So, Mario, what would you say, having been through
look, from my own experience, Labour, it's always Labour. In Labour, it's always with the people who are the loudest, but they don't do nothing, and people who has no experience. What I'm seeing in Australian politics, when the people talk about Labour, are talking about upper echelon in politics, are people who don't have the work experience at all, and they're proudly displaying the work experience in Parliament for 20 years, 30 years, and so on. And that's the problem, because when the minority sits there and represent majority, there's a vote of the conscience, because people want better. And, you know, that's the reason why they're voting politicians on the power. But in my own experience, Labour was always being that was loudest one, but the first one to crush the dreams and to blame everybody for anything and everything. And, you know, what I'm seeing what's happening here in the landscape, Australian landscape of politics, the Labour, it's always talking how they're going to do greater things, how they're going to achieve the better results, how they're going to do this. But there's no clear policies except playing on a people conscious, vote for us, because we're going to represent you well, you're going to get more money. And that's something what I saw in communism continuously. I do remember my father, and I'm sorry to take it this time, 31st December, 8 p.m., there was a news. It comes the earth, you know, behind, you know, some curtain, and then red star over the earth, and we're going to live in, you know, in abundance and everything else. And then there comes the news. And there's a new package of the measures for next year, where we're going to be so very well abundant and everything else. And my father will drunk to death, because he says like another lie, another lie, another lie. And as I said, like Australia's population and the citizens and voters, they really have the choice these elections to vote for those ones who know how to manage expectations and how to manage the money and how to, you know, work better with the people. Labour, for me, has a very, very negative connotations, and it's a bad memory at all.
Yeah, we've gone a little bit, as I'd say, to me, it's about finding ways to include transgender athletes, because it's about that belonging, the inclusion. We can remove the unfair advantage if you think there is, but let's be clear, I can't remember a transgender athlete doing well at the Olympics. We saw Casta Semeric, the runner, where she was forced to take testosterone blockers, and she refused to do it because she said, "This is who I am." We see, you know, 140 kilogram female rugby players crashing into 70 kilogram rugby players. So we don't presume there's an unfair advantage there. And as I said, the United Nations, it's enshrined in their convention, the right to play sport regardless of gender. And now we've even got, this is degenerated into such a place where we've got people asking Albo, journalists, can a man have a baby? Like, And I want to be clear here. A man can't have a baby. A transgender man who still has his uterus can. There's a distinction there. So they put Elbow on the spot and he wasn't sure what to say because the pylon, as you rightly say, Ryan, the freedom of speech, where we've become terrified to say anything, not because we're going to be educated, but because we're going to be attacked. And as I said,
that's right.
It's just ridiculous.
Michael, if I may ask you a question. Sorry, Ryan, please.
No, go ahead, please.
Michael, you said you're the high performance coach in sports, right? And there's now the different question I have to ask. Transgenders need to take all these hormones and all obviously these enhancements and to control the the estrogens and testosterone and everything else. Isn't this now the path now that all these females will start taking maybe steroids or maybe taking some other enhancements to be in the same level as a transgender? When we said talking about transition from male to female, isn't this something we're gonna experience something new, that we're going to have the female sports people start taking enhancement drugs?
That's a great question, Mario, and a really one that's topical, and especially coming from an Eastern Bloc gentleman. We've seen the Eastern Bloc nations. We saw what happened with the Chinese swimmers, where they turned up with a back wide enough to put a billboard on, and there's people trying to gain an unfair advantage all the way through. But to assume that a transgender athlete would transition to go through all of that. We saw Laurel Hubbard, the New Zealand weightlifter, was a mid-range male weightlifter. She transitioned. She didn't get a successful lift at the Olympics. Within sporting codes, and especially the IOC, there's ranges for hormones. So as long as you're between the range, you're okay. Estrogen isn't actually a performance-enhancing drug. Testosterone is the one that is responsible for most of our strength. Estrogen does help in endurance, but these transgender athletes, they lose so much muscle mass. So they normally have a range where they say, right, you've got to transition for 3 years. Their skeletal mass goes down, their bone mass goes down, their VO2 mass goes down. They become shadows. And again, look at Kirsty Miller on Twitter, and she will show you what happened from an elite level athlete to somebody now who, as she says, some days she struggles to put the washing out, still plays football up at Broken Hill. And she is such a great advocate for transgender sports. But again, it's about belonging. It's about getting these kids to be included in clubs. It's not about, let's find a way to keep them out. Let's find how we can bring them in a fair and inclusive way so that they don't dominate. Not that there's been any evidence that they will, but we need to accept we've got to include.
Sounds good. Sounds like a reasonable discussion rather than what we're seeing.
Yes.
And yeah, absolutely.
It is possible.
The whole thing we've had, we keep being told we're walking around on eggshells, and we are. And
we are, of course we are. And politicians in particular, and any time a politician or a candidate steps off the eggshells and says what they think, if it's, well, like I say, the free speech is important, opinions are important. Whether how people respond to those opinions is whether they support the person who says them or not, it's another thing entirely, as opposed to just berating someone and criticizing them and hammering until you force them to shut up. I'd rather hear someone's opinion than have them too fearful to say it, even if I don't agree with it.
Again,
agreement can be reached, and no doubt it can. That everybody say a healthy public discussion, including every levels of society, it's needed. And as Michael says, we need to find a way to include those children, not to exclude those children. And variety it is, and I agree with you, Ryan. The politicians find themselves now in a very bad spotlight. Doesn't matter what you say, how you say, it's going to be interpreted the way somebody wants to interpret whatever you say. But I believe that with the healthy discussions, everybody we can reach the level of conclusion that those kids be included in every aspect of the life and sport as well.
Yep.
If you don't like the opinions of a politician or a candidate, then don't vote for them. You don't have to scream at them.
Exactly. And their supporters try and understand why they think they're right, rather than looking to prove that they're wrong. And a lot of the times you'll find the world will be a better place. And to close with, just sport and art have been with human society for millennia. They are everything. And to say to somebody that you can't do it because of your identity, this is who these kids, who these people are. It's not what they've decided. It's not. And we just need to stop with this attack. Free speech is everything. Attacking people who use that free speech, it goes contrary to the whole idea of free speech. You have the right to say whatever you say, and I forget who said it, but I'll defend that to the death. I may not agree with it, but I'll support it. All right, guys. Thanks for the informed. Look forward to talking next week. And any predictions for how the federal election's shaping up?
Ryan?
I think it will. I mean, it's a pretty stereotypical thing to say, but I think it will go down to the wire. I think Albanese has demonstrated that he's perhaps not as across things as people hope that he might be. We'll see. I think it's going to be close. I don't think anyone can say anything different to that.
I agree, Ryan. I think at this stage, nobody can say nothing. Everything is still open.
All right, guys. I'll look forward to speaking next week. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Ryan.
See you next week.
Thank you.
Thanks.